Hi, good day everyone. I'm Manoj. Welcome to a short lecture note on mathematics for machine learning. Here, me and my friend Swadipto will brush up some important concepts in mathematics that are used in machine learning. Uh, so, this is the content. We shall start discussing on sets and functions, then calculus, and then complexity. After which, my friend Swadipto will carry on discussing the rest of the topics: scalars and vectors, matrices, probability, and statistics. So let's start. Okay, our first topic for today is sets, relations, and functions. In this module, we will cover all the definitions, illustrations, and problems for practice and their importance in ML. So, class, tell me, what is a set? Uh, we must have heard it multiple times, but come on, we must start with the first step if we want to reach the last step, right? So, yeah, bear with me. So, a set is a well defined collection of distinct objects. For example, set of natural numbers, or for instance, set of vowels. We have A, E, I, O, and U. Hence, the set V of vowels consists of A, E, I, O, U, which forms a set. So, so now that we have a set, what do we do with it? We need to work with it, right? So let's see the operations we can do. So consider the Venn diagram of two sets. For better understanding, they can be like for better understanding they can be disjoint or intersecting, but disjoint is no fun. So let's consider the latter. So first we have A union B, which includes all the elements of A and B together, the shaded region, and then A intersection B, which is the common area, and then A del B, which is the difference between the union and the intersection, which we computed. From the union, we remove intersection, we are left with this, right? So this is called symmetric difference, which is also same as A minus B intersection B minus A. We know A minus B implies all the elements in A after removing the elements of B, and B minus A implies all elements in B after removing elements in A. So this is A complement. Next, which is the collection of all the elements except elements of A. And the next one, like now using these operations, we can work to get A intersection B complement, which is this area, this particular shaded area, and then A complement intersection B, which is this particular area, and then A union B complement, which is this area, the shaded region, uh, and then A complement union B complement, which is nothing but A intersection B whole complement, and then A complement intersection B complement, which is A union B whole complement. So these can be also verified easily by working on the Venn diagrams, the shaded regions and all. So yeah. So next we have the laws and identities which come handy while solving problems on sets. So firstly, the identity laws are laws related to set itself. Given we have a set A, its union with null set would be itself, and its intersection with universal set would also be itself. And then coming to the next one, they are domination laws. Like they are laws where the set fades out. Like we see A union universal set is universal set as A is a part of a part, like A is a part, and A intersection null set is a null set as there is nothing in common. So coming to the idempotent laws, like they are laws with itself. We see A union A is A, and then A intersection A is A, which is trivial. And then coming to the complementary laws, like they are laws related to complement, as in consider A complement. It consists everything except A. Now complement of A complement will now mean it should consist of A and exclude everything else. So coming to the commutative laws are laws which show how two sets commute irrespective of the order. So that is A union B is equal to B union A, and A intersection B is equal to B intersection A. Coming to the associative laws, they are laws which show how sets associate among each other. That is A union B union C is equal to A union B union C, and A intersection B intersection C is equal to A intersection B and then the whole intersection C. And coming to the distributive laws, these laws show how distribution is done when both union and intersection are present. So A intersection B union C is equal to, first we apply the intersection to B and C, and then we take the whole union. And similarly, when union is outside, A union B intersection C, the union is applied to B and C, and the whole thing, like we take the intersection of them. So now coming to the De Morgan's law, which states that A union B whole complement is equal to A complement intersection B complement, and A intersection B whole complement is equal to A complement union B complement, which are simple laws which can be verified on the Venn diagram, yet very powerful tools in probability. Coming to the absorption laws, they are laws where a set B absorbs the set A. Here A is a subset of B. Hence, A intersection B would be A, and A union B would be A. Similarly, A union B is B and A intersection B would be A. So complementary laws, like these are trivial laws related to complements where A united with everything except A would give universal set, and A intersected with everything except A would yield us a null set. So the next concept we'll learn is the Cartesian product. So yeah, Cartesian product is a set of ordered pairs A comma B where A belongs to A and B belongs to B. For instance, take A is equal to x comma y comma z and B is equal to 1 comma 2 comma 3. Now if we try to obtain all the ordered pairs of A cross B, we would get x comma 1, x comma 2, x comma 3, y comma 1, y comma 2, y comma 3, z comma 1, z comma 2 and z comma 3. So now that we know about sets and operations, how do we relate? So sets are related when the elements between the two sets relate. Technically, relation R from A to B is a subset of Cartesian product A cross B. In this example, we see Mr. Gino is the teacher teaching Amy, Anna, and Jenny, which is the relation the teachers, like, is the relation is that he is the teacher of all those three, that is domain has with the students range, and Mrs. Lopez teacher of Jocelyn and Daphne. Whereas a function is a well defined relation, as in elements in the domain have unique and specific image. For example, Amy and Anna are daughters of Mrs. Smith. Similarly, Jocelyn and Daphne of Mrs. Sanchez and Jenny of Mrs. Penny. So here in a function, note that though some elements in the domain have same image, it's still unique image, and all the elements in the domain have images. Whereas here this is not a function, as Mr. Gino is the domain teacher multiple, like in the domain he teaches multiple people. Yeah. So we can conclude that every function is a relation, but every relation is not a function. So graphically, most common example is a circle. As we can see here, when a vertical line is drawn, it intersects the curve at 2 points, which essentially means that the function has two images at x is equal to 2, hence can't be a function but a relation. Domain means all the values x can take, while range means all the values we see when the domain is inserted. So, how do we graph a function? It's simple. As the values in the domain are plugged in the function, we end up with a curve corresponding to the y values we obtain. So based on the shape and growth, we can have linear, exponential, polynomial, sinusoidal, etc. Here we can see the curve plotted for different values in the domain yielding a linear function. Other important concepts to understand are the continuity and the differentiability. In simple words, a function is continuous if it's not broken, as in it's a continuous wave. Whereas differentiability means that the derivative of the function or the slope at each point in its domain exists. Hence, function should be continuous in order to be differentiable. So, now it's an exercise for you people. Take your pens and do this for me. So, just graph mod x, give range and domain, and discuss the continuity and differentiability. Uh, I'll wait for 20 seconds. So yeah, let me show you the answers. So we know mod x gives possible positive for all values of x. Hence we would get a curve like this. And coming to the domain, the function takes all reals in the domain but yields only positive reals and 0 and 0 as range. Coming to the continuity, since it has image for all domain, it's continuous but it's not differentiable, as if we observe the left hand limit and the right hand limit of the derivatives do not converge, implying undefined slope at x is equal to 0. So, so yeah, we have discussed a lot, but what is the importance? So if we look into the importance, the things which we discussed carry wide importance in programming languages which use set operations. And secondly, even the data sets we use to train a model align with the concepts we discussed. So in fact, what are data sets? They are attributes corresponding to a person which we feed to the program as a set. And then the functions, continuity and the differentiability forms the core in analyzing the graphs to see the way the model is learning, and accordingly we change course or enhance algorithms. So the next chapter is calculus. In this module, I will discuss about differentiation, partial differentiation and their importance. So what is differentiation? It is the breakdown in-depth analysis using derivatives to monitor how function changes with respect to the input variable. For instance, say we obtain two graphs like these as shown. These two, like from our working model. How do we classify as good and bad? We use differentiation, which says that y is equal to e power x is a predictable one, easily broken, but y is equal to 1 by x is a discontinuous and non-differentiable one, which behaves differently for different inputs, hence a bad function. So to dig into the concepts of differentiation, consider the motion of a car, which is already in motion and which will stop eventually, graphed on speed versus time graph. It tells us how speed varies with respect to time. At any given point, the slope would give the acceleration. If we want to analyze its motion, we need the change in acceleration. To differentiate is to do a breakdown analysis of very small time frames. Hence, delta x is infinitesimally small. Now, if we need the slope of the graph, it would yield us f dash of x is equal to limit as delta x tends to 0, very small, which is very small, f of x plus delta x minus f of x divided by delta x, which is delta y by delta x, which is the slope in the very minute time frame we considered. So, to work with these, we need to know the math behind. So, firstly, let's discuss the rules. 1. Power rule. It says that the derivative of x power n is equal to n into x power n minus 1. This can be proved by using the definition of the derivative which we already saw. We plug in the value x plus delta x in the function which we have and evaluate the expression to yield 6x in this case, where we took 3x square as the function. And then coming to the next rule, we have the sum rule. It says that the derivative of the sum of two functions is the sum of the individual derivatives, which can also be proved similarly by substituting and evaluating the expression. We can see in the same function 3x square, we have substituted and then we have obtained with the value 6x plus 5. And then the next function, the the product rule. The product rule, where derivative of two multiplying functions is equal to the derivative of first function keeping second constant added to the derivative of the second function keeping first constant. And whereas the chain rule, finally, the which says derivative of the function inside a function is the derivative of the core function multiplied by the derivative of the overall function. So, so yeah, so these are some common functions and the derivatives we have. Like we have constant, line, square, exponential, logarithmic, trigonometrical functions, etc. So yeah, derivative of c is 0, constant, like, and derivative of x is 1. Derivative of ax is a, and dx by dx is 1. So yeah, we can see all the most commonly used functions derivatives here. Hmm. Now let's move on to partial differentiation. What is partial differentiation? Partial differentiation is derivative with respect to one of the many variables with others considered as constant. While in normal differentiation we consider them as variable. So what significance does it show? For example, you are a car designer. So you have many factors you would change for better sales, right? You won't be changing the engine and internal parts, but you keep them constant by changing the design, air intake, windshield, the stickers, etc. Hence, you are keeping the other factors constant while you do your job, getting optimal performance. So, so what did we do there? We just varied the parameters we needed, keeping the rest constant. This is what is partial differentiation. Let's solve an example now to contrast. Say we have a function f is equal to x square plus 3y plus 4xz square. Now differentiating with respect to x, as in rest of the terms constant, so y and constant, f is equal to 2x plus 0 plus 4z square. As z square is constant, we took it out. With respect to y, if we differentiate, x square is constant, so 0. 3 comes out and dy by dy is 1 and 4xz square becomes 0. With respect to z, x square becomes 0, 3y becomes 0, 4x comes out and then dz square by dz is equal to 2z. So 4x multiplied by 2z gives us 8xz. Whereas in total differentiation we get 2x square plus 4z square plus 8z plus 3. So what is the importance? The most important and significant role that calculus plays is in the gradient descent algorithm, which is an optimizing algorithm which tries to minimize the error function. It finds the lower point on the error graph by following gradient downhill, computed by gradient slope, where calculus is used. Hence, in the minimization of the error function, the partial derivative for error with respect to each specific weights permit that each weight is updated independently of the other. Each weight is updated in proportion to local gradient of the error curve to find local minima. May not be global minima depending on complexity, but surely a local minima. That's good for our use. So moving on, the third chapter we'll be learning is the complexity theory. In this module, we shall learn about the asymptotic notations, big O and little o and their importance. So yeah, a particular problem in computer science can be solved using various algorithms. But which one do we prefer? Obviously, that takes less time, right? Which is less complex. This is where we use complexity theory to calculate running time of an algorithm with a given input n. So, what are asymptotic notations? We know asymptotic notations, we use them for uh, calculating the runtime of the algorithm. So yeah, we have various notations for that. One, the first one is the big O notation. What is big O notation? Big O describes the worst case running time of a program, as in the upper limit on time. We get big O by counting the number of iterations the algorithm takes in worst case with an input of n. Big O is the most important tool because we must plan for the worst case. For example, binary search algorithm takes O of log n, means that in the worst case it would take order of log n time. So mathematically, O of g of n is defined as f of n such that there exists a c and n naught where 0 less than or equal to f of n less than or equal to c of g of n for all n greater than or equal to n naught. If we see the graph here, the function f of n can't exceed c into g of n after an n greater than n naught. Doesn't matter what it was before n naught. Hence, we can say there exists a c making c g of n an upper bound for f of n. Next, little o notation. It is similar to big O notation but asymptotically tight. Like the definition would be there exists n naught such that after n greater than n naught, the function f of n cannot cross c g of n for all values of c, which means it's restricting the growth of f of n. Like limit, it abides by the rule limit n tends to infinity, f of n by g of n is equal to 0, implying that for large n, the g of n has an incomparably high growth rate than f of n. Hence, f of n becomes insignificant as n tends to infinity. Let's solve an example for more clarity. Say f of n is equal to 2n plus 3. F of n is, firstly, let's check if f of n is equal to big O of n. Yes, as I can find a constant c where the linear function 2n plus 3 can never cross it. Say c is equal to 4, we'll get 4n. So as we plug in the value, we see 4n becomes very highly greater than a 2n plus 3 after an n naught. So hence 4n is an upper bound. So it is, we can say f of n is equal to O of n. But f of n is not equal to O of a small o of n, as 2n plus 3 and n being of the same order, limit n tends to infinity, 2n plus 3 by cn, it comes to be almost constant. Hence it is not equal to small o of n. But f of n is equal to big O of n square, because n square grows very rapidly, making f of n grows very rapidly, and similarly for small o of n square also it grows very rapidly, that the limit tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. Similarly, n cube's growth is also very high compared to the 2n plus 3. And since O of n cube is a rapidly increasing function over 2n plus 3, it gives upper bounds. Hence, now we shall see the importance in ML. Using idea on complexity theory, we can analyze runtimes and choose suitable algorithms for our model. So I have covered sets, functions, calculus and complexity theory so far. Now my friend Swadipto will discuss the next few chapters. Thank you.
Before getting to definition, I would like to discuss about how concept of vector and matrices are important for ML. In CS in general, computer does not perceive the world as we do. So we need to modify our problem in such a way that can be understood by machines. Now let's move on with the definitions. Scalar. Scalar is a physical quantity that is completely described by its magnitude. Examples like temperature, distance, volume, density, etc. Geometrically, quantity doesn't have a direction. Scalar are described by real numbers, but they are not necessarily positive. Like in case of temperature, depending on the scale we choose can be either positive or negative. This usually happens because we choose a certain point of reference as 0, but negative or positive here doesn't imply the direction. Vector. Vector is an object which has both magnitude and direction. Geometrically, a vector has a directed line segment whose line is a magnitude of a vector and with an arrow indicating direction. The direction of the vector is from its tails to its head. So as we can see in the image, the vector is pointed from in the direction of A to B, and the length of the vector is the distance from A to B. A matrix is a mn tuple of value which has m cross n number of values, and it has total structure of m rows and n columns, each one having a real valued number in it. By convention, we call one n matrix R as row and m1 matrices as column. These special matrices are also known as row, column vectors respectively. Now let's look at some basic operation of matrices such as addition. Sum of A and B are calculated by summing them entry wise. Like given a position aii plus bii or aij plus bij, and we sum all those terms together to get, as we can see in the example where we can add. So it's required that A and B have similar structure. Both are of form M cross N matrix. For multiplication is only defined when number of column of the left side and number of rows on the right matrix are equal. Else, multiplication of matrix is not possible. We can see from the image below that it's obvious why number of column of A and number of row of B must be equal. And the final product they have a dimension of number of rows in A and number of column from B. Transpose of a matrix is given by just turning the row as the column and column as the row. A square matrix is called invertible if there exists a matrix B such that AB, BA equal to IN, where IN is the identity matrix. Identity matrix means where all the elements are 0 except the diagonal elements which are 1. Inverse only exists when A is a square matrix and it's non-singular. And if such B exists where AB is I, then B is the inverse of A, which is also known as A inverse and denoted by A to the power minus 1. Vector space. A real vector space V is a vector space, a set with two operations V cross V, V, R cross V, V. V cross V, V means the summation will always lie in the space itself, sum of any two real valued vector space. The second one implies the closed structure of scalar multiplication, and where these conditions are satisfied, V with respect to addition is a abelian group, distributivity, associativity, and existence of a unit or a identity. Now we will move on to probability and statistics. And before going to the definitions, just to give an overview, probability means chances of event happening. Like in ML, we are trying to do prediction based on the past instances. In probability and statistics also, we try to guess the chances of an event happening based on different parameters. So statistics plays an important part in understanding of ML. So we will be looking into the basics of probability and statistics. Probability, as we know, is a chance of a particular event happening. So for probability, we have a sample space. Sample space is all possible outcomes that can happen in that event. Event space is the potential results of outcome that can happen. Event space is always a subset of a sample space. And probability is a number we associate with the chances of an event happening, and that's what we call probability, generally denoted by PA. Probability, the value of probability lies between 0 and 1. It can't be negative because chances of anything happening can be at least 0, and 1 means it will be occurring 100% of time. Moving on to random variables. Random variables is a variable whose values is unknown or function that assigns value to each experiment outcomes. In discrete case, random variable is the one which may take on uncountable number of distinct values, whereas on continuous case, a continuous random variable is one which take infinite number of possible values. As we can see, on our left we have continuous probability density function graph, and on our right we have probability mass function graph. So in case of discrete random variable, we do get probability mass function graph, which is our our right. Our x is fixed and x is finite, so we can get a bar graph, whereas in case of continuous probability density graph, which we get in case of continuous, we get a density graph instead of bar graph. In both the cases, the total probability is 1. Continuous probability cases, integration of x fx dx is 1, and in case of probability mass function, summation of bx is 1. And in case of continuous probability density graph, integration of fx dx is 1. Now let's look at basics of statistics. First is expected value. The expected value of x is a generalization of weighted average of possible values that x can take, each value being weighted according to probability of that event. In case of discrete, we get summation of xipi, and for continuous we get integration of x fx dx. For example, we have a dice. Now dice has 1 to 6 numbers. Now if we add them up and divide it by 6, because probability of each number is 1 by 6, so we get 7 by 2, which is 3.5. So expected value in case of a paired dice is 3.5. Expected value gives us a expected value, or also known as expectation, that in case of an event occurs, which is the most probable value occurs. Variance is of a random variable tell us something about the spread of the value of a variable. Something like how far is value from the expected value we can get from variance. We write variance as expectation of x minus expectation of x whole square. That can also be written as expectation of x square minus expectation of x whole square. And root of variance is also known as standard deviation. These are the very basic tools which can help us to get a grasp on ML. I hope this helps and you can get started with ML. Thank you.